Hello and welcome back to the Little Craft House. If we haven't met before, my name is Nicole and I love to make jewellery and accessories using polymer clay. In today's tutorial, I'm going to be making a cute little trinket dish using a few different but simple techniques. So we're going to go through this step by step so that if you'd like to replicate it and make it for yourself, then you're able to do that. So just before we jump in and get started with the tutorial today, I just wanted to welcome anybody that's new here watching today, but I also want to send out a massive thank you to all of my subscribers. Over the weekend, I reached my goal of 100,000 subscribers. So that was just absolutely amazing. I had the goal to meet this number by Christmas, but it did come early, so I'm just super appreciative of it. I love making things with polymer clay, so having a whole group of people follow along and watch what I do each week, it's just amazing, and yeah, I'm really appreciative of that. So yeah, a massive thank you to all of my subscribers. Okay, so back on with the tutorial. So in the background here, you can see that I have been conditioning up a bunch of polymer clay. So we need to condition the clay to get it all nice and soft and workable because we don't want it to crack as we're using it. So I'm just doing a bit of rolling and folding and rolling and folding a few times just until it is nice and soft. And then I am just popping it through my pasta machine to make it nice and thin. So I'm doing it on the thinnest setting just to make it nice and thin because we need it thin whilst we use it afterwards. But yeah, I'm just going through mainly a bunch of packet colours that I have. The majority of the colours that we're going to use today have all come from the Sculpey Soufflé or the Sculpey Primo families. And the base colour that I will pull out in a minute, the purple, that is going to be from the Fimo Professional range. So Primo Professional takes a little bit longer to condition, but it is a really nice strong clay. So because we're using that for the base of our dish, it is a really good one to use. So I don't need a huge amount of each of these clays, just a little bit of each because yeah, we can always add extra to them afterwards if we need to. And I'm just going to add some greens in here as well because today's slab that we're going to start with is going to be quite floral. I'm in my floral era at the moment. Everything just seems to be flowers and floral. I don't know if it's just the beautiful weather outside or what, but yeah, everything's floral. So I need some greens and I'm going to add this French pink to it as well. I really like that dusty pink style colour. But yeah, that's all the colours that I'm going to be using. They're all rolled nice and thin. And then I've also got a bunch of my cutters. So the cutters were actually what kind of inspired this slab. Or this dish today that we're doing. Oh, there's that purple that I was talking about earlier. So that's the Fimo Professional purple. So I've got quite a big sheet of that. And again, I rolled it out into that thinnest setting on the pasta machine. I'm going to pop it onto this bit of baking paper here because I need to pop it to the side. So I just want to keep the base of it clean. So I'll just pop it on here. Sometimes it's easier to work on the baking paper too because you can sort of spin it around as you need to and move it around to work with. I'm just going to cut off the excess paper though because this sheet's quite big and is going to get in the way. Chuck that to the side. I use baking paper for everything, not just baking on. It's really good for storing scrap clays as well because you can put a layer between each and then just keep stacking up onto your, stacking all the colours on top of each other with a layer of baking paper in between. Right, so back to the cutters. I've got that little pod shape there, which is great for leaves. I've got this one here, which is a fondant push cutter. So it's meant for like icing for cake making, but it works really well with polymer clay, except that I've stained it previously. I've done a little freehand cut of a flower here just to see if I could do it. I actually really like that shape. It's very like organic and not perfect. So I actually really like that. So I'm going to try and do some more of those as well as using the cutters. So I just need to kind of do a whole bunch of each of the shapes in each of the colours because today's design is going to be all really sort of random and colourful. So I'll probably just try and cut just leaves out of the green ones and then a bit of everything however I go with the other ones. So the different styles of flowers. Now I knew that was going to happen, get stuck in this cutter. You just, a second ago, I just rolled the clays onto the tile to hopefully bond the clay to the tile so that when I cut the small little leaves out, it would stick on the tile and not in the cutter, but it stuck in the cutter. So I just pushed it out with the blade and yeah, it didn't leave any marks or anything, so all good. So, oh, there we go. These are working better. It's just quicker if it doesn't get stuck in the cutter. I'm kind of wobbling it a little bit as I'm putting it down there. I don't know if you can kind of see that. That's kind of helping it to not get stuck. Now, I should have mentioned before as well, the reason that I rolled all of these clays down to being thin on that thinnest setting on the pasta machine is because we're going to be layering them onto that base piece of clay to make the design today. So when we roll it down again to make it flat and one level, I don't want these elements, these leaves and flowers, I don't want them to all stretch and distort. So by making them as thin as I can to start with, then it's going to keep the shapes a lot better once we roll it down to being a flat design. So another thing to consider when doing this sort of thing as well is that because we are going to be stacking each of these elements onto that base sheet, we need to make sure that all the edges are nice and clean. So as I'm cutting these pieces out, I'm just kind of smoothing them a little bit with my fingers, just to smooth off any of those rough edges. If I need to use the knife to trim it down, I can do that. But yeah, once we start layering afterwards, that's when we can no longer clean them up at all. So yeah, it's better to do that little bit of work now, making them neat and tidy, rather than putting them on and regretting it afterwards. Okay, so freehand cutting is definitely not my thing, which is why I did that little sample of that orange one earlier. I just wanted to know if I was going to be able to do it. I do really like that organic, imperfect sort of style and shape that comes with freehand cutting. So I'm hoping that I can do it enough that I like it, because when I have done this previously, it's been a big fail and I've not liked the pieces. But that one turned out cute. I like that. That one's good. So hopefully my tries today all come out the same. But you know, the good thing with polymer clay is that if it doesn't work and I don't like how that paste turned out and what it looks like, I'll just scrunch it back up again and whack it back through the pasta machine, and the piece of clay will come out as good as new and I can start again. That's the one benefit of polymer clay. It's not set in stone until you've baked it. That one turned out kind of cute too. That top bit's a bit long, but we can work with that. I might just angle that towards the edge where it's not going to be used, or where I sort of cut it down a little bit or something. All right, now I'm just going back onto the cutters. So this is the push one. Kind of cool. Cute. Perfect. Didn't even need to smooth the edges of that one, which was really good. It helps by kind of shimmering it onto the tile a little bit as well, kind of moving it backwards and forwards. It kind of knocks off any of that excess clay, but they're nice and easy. And with each of these scraps, I will probably ball them back up, put them back through the machine just so I can cut some more shapes out of them, because I want to have quite a few so that I can go really random and really fill up the design today. Right, so I might just pop this into fast motion so that you can still watch me cut out all the pieces, but you don't have to watch it in real time because it did actually take quite a bit of time to get all these shapes all cut out. So something that I kind of learnt as I was freehand cutting these pieces was that if I held the clay down with my hands and kind of gave it a bit of a pull just to tighten the clay, it just kind of made the cutting a little bit easier. That little flower was a little bit funny, but that's all right. I'll work with him. This one turns out much better. But yeah, if I give it a bit of a pull, then yeah, just kind of, it doesn't drag as I'm moving the knife around. Now I grabbed a metal cutter to make it perfect, but I chopped the top of the petal off. So anything that's slightly dodged like that, I'll either layer something on top of it or I'll put it towards the edge of the design, because I'm going to have to trim the design into like the circular shape to make the dish. So yeah, anything that's a bit imperfect can just go towards those edges, or I'll chuck a leaf over the top of it or something. So I'm not going to just scrunch up anything that's a little bit dodgy. Only if it just turns out really dodgy, then I'll scrunch it up and start again. Right, so I'm going to bring my base piece over, and I am just going to work with it straight on the tile. I won't keep it on the baking paper. It has that little fold mark in it, but that's okay. We're not going to see it. I'm left these three colours as is because I'm going to do the good old rip and tear technique, which is literally just ripping and tearing your clay into pieces and just chucking them down on that base piece. So this is just going to start to fill up this base with colour. I chose purple because it's obviously a nice purple, and it's a good little contrasting colour as well with some of these other colours. But I want the majority of this purple to be filled. So I only want little bits peekabooing out. So I'm just going to use up these three, the orange and the blues, just to start filling up the base. So this rip and tear method is a really good simple one, especially if you're starting out as a beginner, but it can also be used in a lot more complicated designs as well. It just is a great way to start that base off. You'll find over in my tutorials that I've done previously, I've done this technique and then used things like silk screens or textures and all that sort of thing over the top of it, just to create more interest and something different. So yeah, today though we are going to be doing the layered flowers, and we're also going to be using the Posca Paint Pens as well to add some detail. So we'll get onto that bit afterwards, but we just got to work on this base first. So I'm just randomly putting it all down. You'll notice that I'm not pressing it down though, because I want to be able to move it if I decide to change, like if a piece looks like it's in the wrong spot. I want the ability to be able to change it. So by just placing it down is going to give me the ability to move it around as I need to. Okay, so I know I have a lot of colours to go on top and make it all very colourful, but I felt that this base piece was just starting to look a little bit dull. So I've grabbed some of the mustard yellow just to add to it, just to lift up the colours a little bit more, just to brighten it up a little bit, and I think it was definitely needed. I think it looks so much better having this yellow added. And you'll also notice that there's now not a lot of purple showing through either, which is what I wanted. So once I'm happy with how everything is positioned, I'm just going to chuck that bit of baking paper down and give a quick little press roll over just to secure it all down, making it all nice and flat and securing it in position. And now I can start layering all the flowers. So same as I just mentioned before, I'm just going to pop them down randomly, and then if I need to move them afterwards, then I will, especially because I've now used that mustard yellow as the base. I want to try and avoid something that I've cut out with the yellow being on top of yellow, otherwise you're just not going to see it. I'm also being careful with those orange flowers as well. It is a different orange to what's used in the base, but it is very similar, so I don't want it to overlap too much, because I don't want yeah, I want to be able to see it. I don't want it to just disappear into that background. And because the leaves are the smallest items, I thought I would leave those ones until last to just pop them in and use them as filler. Now I've put that yellow leaf right in the middle there, and I really regret that. I shouldn't have done that, but I didn't really notice it until later once I've baked it up, and then I was like, why did I do that? So yeah, now I've just seen myself put it down. I wish I just moved it to the side a little bit just so it wasn't overlapping that other yellow bit. Once I'm happy with all the positionings, I'm just going to grab that bit of baking paper back out and roll it down again. The reason I use the baking paper is I don't want the pieces of clay to grab onto my roller and move out of position. That's why I put the baking paper down first. I'm also not rolling as such, I'm just rubbing it. And as I mentioned earlier, I've done the clay nice and thin so that in this process here, as I'm pushing it and squishing it into the base, the flowers and the leaves, they're not going to change too much. They will change a little bit because they're being pushed and flattened, but I do want to keep that level of distortion minimal, which is also why I've started by rubbing and doing it in sort of a circular motion rather than rolling as such, because rolling will stretch the images in the direction that you're rolling it, whereas the rubbing's just evenly pushing down. So now that I've taken the sheet off, the baking sheet off, now I'm just giving it a bit of a roll just to make sure that it is all nice and flattened down and that my piece is nice and level. So the next thing that we need to do is cut out our dish. Now I do have this dish cutter, and I've also got the dish here which I'm going to use to shape the dish, but I actually wanted it a little bit bigger than what this cutter is because I want it to kind of have a wibbly wobbly effect along the top. So what I'm going to do is use the cutter as a guide, but I'm just going to freehand cut around the outside. So this is completely dangerous because, as I said before, I am terrible at freehand cutting. So look at me try and cut a circle. It's just not working. I probably should have found something that was circular that was bigger and it would have been a lot more even. But I can tell you that in the end, you don't notice and you can't tell, but yeah, my freehand cutting, I really need to practice, I think, because this is quite shocking. Now, I also made a slight mistake here because before I cut the circle, I should have used my blade to try and release that base piece off of the tile, because as we were doing all that rolling and smoothing out of the design, it's obviously kept being flattened each time onto the tile. So at no point did I think to release it, so I probably should have done that before. So it's just making this stage slightly more difficult. But what I'm doing first is just removing all that outside stuff. Some of the bits are still usable, so I can still, I still would be able to cut some studs and things out of those if I wanted to. But I actually have another idea which I will show you what I'm going to do to use up those scraps in a minute as well. So just before I go and release this circle, I am just giving it a, well, I'm trying to give it a bit of a neaten up. It dipped in a little bit on that side, so just trying to neaten it slightly. So I'm going to use my flexi blade and I'm going to wiggle it underneath the clay to try and release it from being stuck to the tile. So I'm going to go from each angle, and I'm just going to go slowly, and I'm trying to scrape that blade part against the tile so that it doesn't cut into the base clay. Usually I would do this process along the way, and it just makes it so much easier if you do it every time that you do some rolling, but I got carried away with working on my design, so I didn't do it. There we go. So now it's nice and released. Now we're going to need to shape the dish. So I like to use a ceramic dish, which this one I just got at the op shop for like $1. So it's been the most handiest dish for when I'm making trinket dishes. I use it as my guide all the time. I'm going to just really carefully push my piece into the dish so that it takes on that shape, and I'm wanting the outside to do this like wavy pattern, just because I think that that's fun. So I just want to have that wavy sort of look. I'm trying to make it even, so this takes me a few moments just to get it all nice and a nice even wave around the edges. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with how that is looking. So I'm now going to pop it into the oven, but I'm only going to bake it for 10 minutes. After the 10 minutes, I am going to pop it out of the base dish because I don't want it to get stuck in there. So I'll pop it out and then I will continue cooking it until it is nice and cooked. So probably about 45 to an hour all up. Okay, I mentioned earlier about the scraps. So really quickly, this is what I did with the scraps to make them usable. Okay, so out of the oven and it's all cooled down and it is looking pretty fab. But I do want to do one more thing to it just to add some extra details. So I'm going to grab some of my Posca Paint Pens, and with these we're going to draw on some details. So it is a little bit harder because it's in this dish shape, but yeah, we're going to manage to do it. We're going to add some different just some different designs onto it. And I think that'll really help just to finish it off and just really make each of these little flowers and leaves really sort of pop and stand out from that base. So if you've been watching me for a while, you'll know that I do love using these Posca Paint Pens. I do have a few dedicated tutorials to using them and giving quite a few little tips and tricks when using them with the polymer clay. But one thing that I will share today is that when we've finished putting our designs on, we do need to rebake the piece because we need to set that paint from the paint pens. So once I've finished doing all my little designs on here, I'm just going to pop it back into the oven for another 10 minutes. Don't worry about the clay burning because the clay will be totally fine. It doesn't mind having multiple bakes. Yeah, we could just pop it back in and just set that paint pen, and then if we want to, we can seal it. So I think I will seal this because I'm going to be using this little dish to store my earrings and rings and things in when I go to bed at night. So therefore, yeah, I'll just have it either next to my bedside table or whatever, but it's going to get a bit of use. It's going to have things moving around in it. So sealing it will be best to do that, which will just help to protect that paint as well. And I will apologise because even though this is a step-by-step tutorial, I did forget to film the part where I've varnished and applied the gloss glaze onto my trinket dish. So what I used was the Fimo gloss varnish, and I just very carefully and very kind of quickly used a brush to brush over the design. I didn't want to reactivate that Posca, so the quicker you can apply it, the better. And yeah, and then it gave it a nice little shine as well so that it is nice and hard wearing. And another thing that I also, well, I actually didn't do it, but you may want to do it if your edges are a little bit rough. You might want to grab a little bit of fine grit sandpaper and sand off any of the edges if there's any rough bits. I actually didn't do it. My edges just seemed to be nice and smooth enough, so I didn't really think that they needed to be sanded down. But yeah, you've always got that as an option if you want to sand it. If there's any little bits that kind of a bit rough on there, then you can sand it as well. And I would probably do the sanding before adding the Posca, but I'd definitely do it before adding the varnish. So this just about brings us to the end of today's tutorial, mainly because I forgot to finish filming those last two elements. But anyway, I've talked you through it, so hopefully if you're making this for yourself, you'll be able to still complete the tutorial and have your own little trinket dish, which will also look amazing. I'm super happy with this design and how it turned out. So I think I'm going to have to replicate this again another time for a different project. I've got a few in mind. I might, yeah, I don't know. Keep watching, stay tuned. You'll see what I have in mind. But yeah, thank you for joining me today, guys. It's been lots of fun and it's been nice to create something a little bit different as well. Hope you've enjoyed it and thanks for coming along with me. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you again next week. Bye.